I call the honourable member Amy Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, it's a great pleasure to rise in the second reading debate and speak in favour of the Telecommunications, TSO, Broadband and Other Matters Amendment Bill, which obviously spent some time before the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, of which I'm a part. So I just want to start my contribution by just taking a moment to say that broadband is very much infrastructure. You know, it didn't used to be as little as 5 or 10 years back, but now I think it is quite safe to say that broadband is as important an item of infrastructure as power or phone or roading. And in fact, sir, I've been amazed, as I'm sure many members of the House have, how quickly New Zealand has adopted broadband access and takes it as an absolutely fundamental part of existence. And I want to say that particularly in my capacity as the electorate MP for a largely rural electorate. So when you're not in the major cities, you rely on access to the world through broadband increasingly. Having broadband in our houses lets us connect with our suppliers, our customers, our advisors, our lawyers, accountants, bankers, as if we were there. And so the productivity gains you have from access to broadband, particularly in those rural and more remote communities, is significant. So New Zealand is a remote country, and yet through access to good, high-quality broadband, we can do business throughout the world in an almost seamless way. It is a way of New Zealand negating that geographical disadvantage that we're at. And yet what we were seeing happening, Mr Speaker, was that fibre was not being rolled out beyond very limited CBD districts. Now that, sir, had tremendously was disadvantageous to those rural and remote communities, and it was going to take government being prepared to put some money up to incentivise business to get on board for that rollout to happen. That's what we promised in 2008 to the people of New Zealand. That's what New Zealand elected this national-led government to deliver. And so this bill is a large part of delivering that rollout that will see 75% of New Zealanders with access to high-speed, ultra-fast broadband, and the vast bulk of the rest of New Zealand connected through our rural broadband initiative. So it will make us one of the most connected countries in the world. And I think that, sir, is something to be very, very proud of. One of the things I think it is important to get on record is that this is about government and private enterprise working in partnership to roll out the framework. And that framework is open access. So as it's rolled out, that infrastructure, backbone infrastructure is rolled out, any internet service provider can access it and offer those services to the customers. This is not about telecom being the only game in town, and I'll come back to Ms Curran's comments on telecom in a moment. This is about the backbone infrastructure being rolled out by partnership with government and industry, and every internet service provider being able to access that to provide those services to New Zealanders. So I just want to touch on a couple of other things in the bill before I move back to the comments of the Speaker proceeding. The bill also, sir, of course, amends the telecom service obligations, the service agreements between the Crown and providers. It sets up the Telecommunications Development Levy to fund those service obligation compensations and upgrades of infrastructure and the like, and sets out, of course, the functional separation rules for telecom. So while the big part of this debate will no doubt focus on the UFB and RBI rollouts, there are those important other aspects to the bill that I think are just worth getting on the record. So can I just comment that we've heard an interesting array of objections from Labor, and over the course of the UFB discussions and the RBI discussions, we've heard them say it's too fast, it's all happening too fast. We've heard them say it's all happening too slow. We've heard Labor say the government's putting in far too much money. We've heard them say the government's putting in not nearly enough money. Now we're hearing them hammer us for electing Telecom as the provider. And yet let me just read to the House some comments from Ms Curran. Ms Curran, who just stood there and made a vitriolic attack on Telecom as the provider. Let me just read you some of these comments. It looks very interesting. I certainly think any proposal that puts Telecom seriously in the frame is worthy of merit and should be looked at carefully by Crown Fibre Holdings and the government, because the future of Telecom is important. Thank you, Ms Curran, for that. What about this one? We think Telecom should have a future in New Zealand, and if that requires it to structurally separate, it should seriously consider doing so. They should have a crack at accessing the broadband money. It is obvious to everyone that Telecom desperately want to and need to be in the running. It is not in New Zealand's interest for Telecom to be run into the ground and excluded from the biggest network build for the next generation or more. Those comments coming from the same member who just stood in this House, Mr Speaker, and attacked this government and attacked Telecom for accepting Telecom as the broadband provider. Labor needs to decide where it stands. Why aren't they supporting this bill? Why is it at the same time too fast, too slow, too much, too little, the right provider, the wrong provider? Labor's only real objection to this bill, sir, is that they didn't do it and a national-led government did. I'm very pleased to commend it to the House.
I call the